It's another first on the Unmeasured podcast because I have not only one incredible co-host joining me today, but two incredible co-hosts joining me. I am so excited to be here with my absolutely amazing, wonderful, inspiring friends, Whitney Abraham and Stephanie Hanna. Thank you guys so much for coming on and joining me today.
Oh, it's our joy.
Yes.
So happy. Whit is a marketing strategist and business coach, co-founder of Real Social, which is a social media mentoring for real estate pros, the co-host of Capture Your Confidence podcast with Steph. Steph is an attorney, founder of The Other 85, helping attorneys and professionals master their soft skills, and the other co-host of the Capture Your Confidence podcast. And it's just really special to have these queens of confidence here with us today because the listener question for this episode is all about confidence. The question is, I've done some perfectionism self-work over the last several years and am recently realizing deeper places where perfectionism still exists, particularly in decision-making. The self-work never ends, a both and of joy and weariness. What are your thoughts on navigating changes while also feeling the need to have a perfect plan to tackle it all? So I'm so excited to have you here today to be able to talk about what does it look like to find our confidence in the midst of imperfection? Because I really think that's what it comes down to.
I just I want to hold this person softly in my hands because she's just like a baby bird that has finally figured it out. Like that it's never going to feel totally safe. Like you're always going to be warring with or realizing more and more that's coming up that you need to address as you're doing the self-work. And so she's in this really vulnerable and uncomfortable spot of like, oh my gosh, it's not done. And now I'm actually kind of realizing it's never done. And that's so scary.
Yes.
Yeah. I mean, I think we always say confidence is a journey and there is no endpoint. You don't just arrive somewhere and, go take a nap, right? It's always something that you're working on. But that realization can be a little deflating because you may have had it in your mind this whole time that like, okay, I just got to do the thing and then I'm there.
I'm going to get there.
Yes. And then magic happens. And then you get there and you're like, whoa, it's not exactly like that.
Totally. I am trying to remember what celebrity said, I wish people knew that being really rich wasn't the answer to all of their problems, And
Yes.
I think it's kind of like that thing, right? It's like we have this idea that once we have a certain thing that we have gotten to, a certain outcome, a certain destination, that all of our problems are going to go away. And it really is so much of no, you're human at all the phases. You always have to deal with the realities of being a human being. And the reality of being human is being imperfect. And there are always new situations to navigate and new relationship dynamics to figure out and new parts of yourself to get to know and maybe new dreams that you're going after. Or it really never ends. Did either one of you have an experience in your life where you felt like, I thought that once this thing happened, that I would be good to go forever? This was the thing that once I experienced it, I was not going to have to keep working on this stuff. It was all going to be fixed, something external from yourself that maybe you achieved or experienced. Did either one of you have a moment like that?
Like 1,000 of them every
Yeah.
day. It's big ones
Yeah.
and small ones. I think the small ones are actually the hardest ones to swallow. But big ones, I mean, like seeing success in business, right? Like hitting milestones in business that you think, oh my gosh, like I will have made it when I hit this thing. And then you do it and you look around and you're like, I don't feel any better, any different, any more qualified, any more anything. As a matter of fact, I feel even more afraid because now I have arrived at this destination and I don't know what's next. And that's actually dinging my confidence because the plan stopped here, right? Like you take all this time to make the plan of where you're headed. And then when you get to that destination, if you haven't kept going and making the plan, you're like, oh crap, what do I do now? So big and small moments, but the small ones I think are actually the worst because it's the little tiny moments of like, whether you think, okay, if I can just figure out a bedtime routine for my kids. I will have confidence that like they're growing, like they're maturing, right? And so then you put all this work to engineer the perfect bedtime schedule. And then like it doesn't matter what you do, it's always an absolute crapshoot. And so you're standing there looking at your small child like I have no idea what I'm doing here. I have no idea how to help you. And I like my confidence is wrecked in this one small task, which is actually a big task, being a mom, right? But it's a bedtime routine. I think the small ones actually get you way worse than the big ones.
Yeah, no, the one that comes to mind for me in a business sense has been securing certain clients. Like I have always thought like, oh, if I get this type of client, like, okay, then it will be easy or then it will whatever. And as those have come, I'm like, oh no, it's actually the same amount of work, a little bit more. And kind of like what Whit said, now I have them. So now what? You know, what's the next one? But the cool thing I think about confidence is that you can learn how to navigate all of those situations. And so it comes with you always. So I think once you can flip the mindset and understand that, like, no, the thing I'm working on is not specific to one situation, but it's just specific to me as I navigate all the situations, then I think you're starting to get closer to kind of really unlocking the secret.
I love this, Stephanie. And, you know, when I think about our collective and separate journeys, one thing stands out to me, and I've watched Simi do this too, like so beautifully. The journey to building confidence started with all of these external measures of like, I'm trying to build my confidence in my business. I'm trying to build my confidence in the way that I feel in my body. I'm trying to build my confidence in mothering, whatever the thing is. It all started externally. But as we've grown as women and we've actually done the real work to build confidence, it's become so much about confidence with myself. Like I know I have myself. It's not about external measures. It's not about accomplishing anything. It's about feeling at home and trusting that like whatever life throws at me, I'm going to be able to figure out, and I'm not making it a race anymore. Like I'm just simply here to be with myself.
I love thinking about self-confidence as self-trust. And
Mhm.
in any situation being like, how can I trust myself here? And I think that that's how we navigate things without a perfect plan. Also, when you've created enough perfect plans in your life and realized that, oh my gosh, that doesn't mean that things don't go awry, or that doesn't mean that I don't get let down, or that the outcome isn't exactly like what I was hoping for, or maybe I even do execute this plan and get the outcome, but because it's something really external to myself, I still don't feel fulfilled inside. We're
Mhm.
able to take the confidence from being something outside of ourselves to saying, like,
Mhm.
it has to come from within. It has to be something within that can exist regardless of what's going on around us. And Steph, you said something yesterday when I was listening to you lead a discussion on difficult conversations, and you said that if your measure of success is defined by other people's behavior, like that's a real recipe for disaster. Can you elaborate on that a little bit? Because that, I think that's something everybody needs to hear again
Yeah.
and again.
Mm. And
Yes.
again and again.
Yeah.
Right. Well, it's funny. It was coming from, we were talking with someone who was saying, I tried to have this difficult conversation with the person and I did everything that I was planning to do, and they still didn't just agree with me. Or we didn't arrive to the conclusion that I thought we were going to arrive. And that was kind of a failure. That's exactly how she described it. And it just occurred to me that, like, whoa, before we even dig any deeper, we got to fix this part here, because if we're basing our measure of success or failure on how someone else is reacting to the work that we've done, we can never control that. And so the sooner that we can eliminate that mindset and just know that, success is really our own definition and that's the consistent measure, the quicker we can kind of get to this confidence place that we're all trying to get to, right? And the self-trust. But yeah, I think it was I was glad she said it, because I'm sure a lot of us have thought that or felt that at many times, that, the other person isn't doing what I thought they were going to do. And so now it must be something wrong with me.
And what a missed opportunity to celebrate like that you did the hardest thing.
Yeah.
You showed up and did what you said you wanted to do, which you knew was going to be
Mhm.
hard, and you faced a response you didn't expect or want. Like that's even harder, right? That is the definition of success. I did this despite adversity. Regardless of how somebody else responded, I showed up and did this thing, which was really hard and was causing me stress and anxiety. Like that is a humongous moment of celebration. I think any woman who's ever gone through therapy, I think any woman who's like ever had to show up and say something that they were like making themselves nauseous over, like if you don't take the time to celebrate the fact that you did that, what a missed chance to build confidence and to support yourself and say, hey, regardless of how somebody responded to this, I still did it. Like that's humongous.
Yeah.
And that conversation, you know, for that person, it's like, okay, this didn't go according to my plan. I had a plan. It didn't go according to my plan. And the outcome wasn't the perfect outcome. It wasn't the outcome that I was hoping for. And still being able to hold that while also acknowledging I can trust myself in this situation. Like I did my part. I am practicing the things that are important to me. I'm working on the things that I'm working on, to be able to see like, yeah, sometimes we can be doing all of that and the outcome still isn't what we hoped for. And that doesn't mean that we did anything wrong or that we are bad. And I think for people who struggle with perfectionism is a coping mechanism. And so I think if anyone identifies as feeling like a perfectionist, it's so valuable to examine, where did I learn that I needed to be perfect? And what am I trying to protect myself from? Always a positive intent. Like it's self-protective. It developed for a reason. And really asking, like, what am I trying to protect myself from? Where did I learn that I needed to be perfect? And being able to comfort yourself and support yourself in that underlying desire of like, I learned that I needed to be perfect to feel loved by my parents, or learned that I needed to be perfect to get attention, or I learned that I needed to be perfect to not rock the boat, or whatever it might be. And to be able to then create an inner dialogue with yourself that speaks to that. Because I think if you feel like, oh my gosh, I have to be perfect, or, you know, bad things are going to happen to me, then to be able to have a situation where you're like, all right, I did the things that, you know, I'm working on, and I showed up in a way that I feel proud of, but like, it wasn't the perfect outcome, or the plan didn't go perfectly, or I can't even figure out how to create a perfect plan. To be able to say to yourself, like, I know it's hard when things don't work out the way that you want, but like, you are safe and you can handle this. And that, I think, is such an important piece of it, because people don't just want things to be perfect because they want
Because
things
they
to be
like
perfect.
perfect.
Yeah. It's like
No.
there's something else
Yes.
there that makes it feel really scary when that doesn't happen.
And like, first of all, can we have a moment of silence for every single one of the coping skills that used to work for us that we've figured out don't work for us anymore? Like, what if we need a funeral? Like, I'm so annoyed. I'm so frustrated, right? These skills that help keep us, make us feel safe, even though they're really not that. It's us that keeps us safe. Those things, we cycle through them at whatever time periods in our life we need them. And then once we realize it's not working anymore, that self-awareness again, it's when she wrote that question, she's sitting in the nest of realizing that her coping skill isn't working for her anymore. And what do I do with this mess now? Like, I'm in this nest, the eggshell is everywhere, it's broken, it's not going to keep me warm anymore.
Yeah.
What do I do with this big fat mess? It's the worst feeling ever,
Totally.
until you take the next right step to prove to yourself that you didn't need that thing anyway.
Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely. How do each of you navigate, you know, navigating changes without feeling the need to have a perfect plan? I want to use like her exact language. Like, how do you navigate a change without feeling like you need to have a perfect plan? Because I think I know I've heard you talk a lot about, if you wait till everything's perfect, like, you're going to be waiting a really, really long time. Like, it's hard to take action if you're waiting for things to be perfect, because that rarely, if ever, happens.
I will jokingly but seriously say to clients all the time, I've literally never put out something in the world that I felt met the standard of what I wanted it to be. I have really high expectations. I have a vision of like how good it could be, right? And sometimes my skill doesn't match the caliber of what my dream looks like because I'm a human, and I'm learning and I'm getting better at what I do. And so, unfortunately, if I were to work behind the scenes, perfecting over and over again before I put it out into the world. Honestly, by the time I got it out into the world, your girl's fickle. Like I change my mind all the time and I get new interests. So I would literally have built that skill and then never leveraged it because I would have moved on to the next thing. And I don't really know how I got to this place of letting go of that perfection, but I just tell myself in the moment, it's never looked the way you wanted it to look, but the only way it can look that way is if you start right here. The only way you're going to get it to look the way you want is if you start right now.
Yeah. And for me, I think I've discovered over the years that it's really just a disguise for procrastination. Like they kind of go hand in hand. And so, same kind of thing. Like you got to go now because it's not actually perfectionism. It's just procrastination, which is founded in discomfort, and so then you just kind of, when you think it through, you're
You're
like, okay,
stewing in it.
yes, this whole thing is a hoax. So I might as well just go forward and take some action and figure it out. Because, the irony is you actually can't make progress without the action.
Mhm.
And so, like dwelling in that perfectionism and trying to set things up and, get things going and get the plan, you're actually doing yourself a disservice because you can't even like begin to really
Mhm.
see what that looks like without taking action.
One thing that really tactically did help me move through this, especially in times where I'm doing something big and I'm afraid to do those things and I'm putting them off. I remind myself of all the times that I feel absolute relief when the hard thing is done. So we spend all this time building up the bad conversation, the scary leap, the whatever the thing is. Like there's all of this anxiety and anticipation that leads up to it. And I think a lot of times women sit in that nest of discomfort for a really long time. But the minute that you do the thing, you immediately feel this like, oh, thank God that's done. And so I have literally just reminded myself, as soon as you do this, like the relief comes, whether or not it goes well, you're still going to feel the relief of whatever pressure and anxiety you're putting on yourself. And so I've kind of trained myself to realize like, oh yeah, this is uncomfortable. However, the relief is literally on the tail end of me doing it.
The anticipatory anxiety is worse than like whatever is going to happen when you actually do it.
Mhm.
Absolutely. I was having a conversation with a friend yesterday about motherhood and how I think when things don't go according to plan, like maybe you forget something like for your kid at school, or you forget a birthday party, or you forget a dose of medication or whatever. I'm just listing off things that have happened in the last 14
Happened
days
to
for
you.
myself. I'm just rattling off a couple of the things that I have completely forgotten about in the last 14 days, not because I don't care about my kids or because I'm not trying, just because the cognitive load of, for me, I'm like the cognitive load of work and parenting and, you know, all of it. And the holidays right now, like when we're recording this, like, I don't know. It's just, it has felt like it's impossible for things to not slip through the cracks. But I think when we, like we've kind of touched on, when you do everything in a way that like you can feel proud of, but it still doesn't work out, like finding confidence then. But now I'd love to talk about what happens when you make mistakes. And you're like,
Mhm.
wow, I wish that I hadn't forgotten that thing, or I wish that I hadn't like opened that email and thought I'll reply to that later, and then realized 3 weeks later, like that I forgot to save it as unread and I still haven't replied to it, or whatever it might be. Or you snap at someone that you love because you're, feeling stressed, whatever it might be, you make a mistake. And you feel like there must be a plan or a way to like optimize this situation that I'll never have to make a mistake again. And to me, I feel like this is, of course, there are things that we can do to help us remember things and to help us keep track of everything and to help us to, treat others the way that we want to treat them all the time. And then there's the reality of being human, which is like sometimes things get missed, or sometimes we get overloaded, or sometimes we, get short tempered with someone that we care about and we need to repair that situation. And uh, the conversation that we were having is like in those moments, we always feel like I'm doing something wrong and someone else has cracked this code and has it figured out. And I wonder how you two feel about that. For me, I was like, I think I just need to make peace with like being human. And of course, doing all the things that I can to support myself and my obligations and all that stuff. And still, mistakes will be made.
You know, it's very interesting to me how hard women are, especially on themselves about this, because Simi, if you were to make a mistake with a friend, the number one thing, the number one thought that would run through their mind before passing any judgment would probably be the assumption of positive intent. We are really good at looking at others and remembering that the intention behind the action was probably not hurtful or to screw something up. We are really good at that with other people. We are really terrible at that with ourselves. And so part of this whole being a human thing is learning how to put the lens of positive intent on yourself when mistakes happen first, as the very first response. That is a forever tool. And I will tell you, it does not come naturally, but it will get faster. I'm at a place in my life right now where I can very easily say to myself, man, didn't go the way I wanted. Like, I'm a human being. I tried my best, right? Sometimes I make mistakes. I'm not too hard on myself about them. I also have learned to really love mistakes. So for me personally, I try and find the one good thing that came from it. Like, I screwed up a meeting, but I got more time with my kids. Or I did something and it didn't go well, but that it created a new idea for me in business, right? So all of these things, I'm always looking for the nuggets of what can I learn here? What positive thing came from it, right? Whatever, even if the positive thing is like, I don't effing want to do that ever again. That's a positive thing.
Now you know.
Right.
Yes. Yes. No, I mean, I agree. I mean, the best teachers I've ever had have been failure and mistakes. And I think the quicker you get there, the quicker you're able to embrace them. And then from a practical standpoint, right? If you're dropping the same ball over and over and over again, right? Either is that a ball we really need? Maybe we need to get rid of it. Or is there a system we can put in place to, help us? Because the mistakes we're talking about, those are like, I went for something big and it fell through and it didn't work out, or I was trying to do this and it just didn't play out the way that I wanted to. The little mistakes like scheduling mistakes and that I feel like those are easier fixes to me, because either I'm doing too much,
Yeah.
and so I probably should do fewer things, or I should spend some more time with my calendar, or you know what I mean, or try to come up with a more practical fix to remedy some of those situations. But in both situations, recognizing that this best teacher is experience and going through these situations, and typically we're not making the same exact mistake twice, right? I mean, because it's that good of a teacher, it can steer us in a different direction.
I also just want to remind every woman out there who's listening to this, the mistakes that they're making are usually very low threshold risk mistakes. It's not like I drove drunk. Oops. Like, we're not
Right.
making,
Right.
you know what I'm saying?
That did not happen in the last
Right.
that did not happen.
But remind yourself again, these mistakes that I'm making are honest, innocent mistakes, not like catastrophic end of times mistakes. And I think we cook up that this small thing is a way bigger thing than it is in our heads. And so just to remember, like, the memory, like, you're not a surgeon, like, unless you're a surgeon, at which point, like, this precludes you. And then you listen to a surgeon talk to you through this, because I don't know how to tell you to do that. But like, we're not making catastrophic life decisions here. We're talking about like, oops, I overbooked myself.
Mm-hmm. Totally.
Like, ease up, honey. It's okay.
Yeah. And that's the quote of the episode.
Ease up, honey.
Oh my gosh, I love it. I totally agree with this growth mindset and really like learning from experience and learning from things that feel like mistakes, learning from failure. Do either of you have examples, big or small, of moments in time where you experience something that And I always love to say like no such thing as failure, only feedback, but like maybe that felt in the moment like, yeah, there's I'm getting feedback from this, but there's also an element where this feels like failure to me, and I'm choosing to learn from it or grow from it or pivot from it. Like, do either one of you have examples that come to mind for you where you're like, yeah, I learned a lot from that?
Mhm. Yeah, I
You're
know
like,
you
no,
do.
none.
No, I do. I am the queen of ignoring signs. Okay. So, like, if I recognize something's feeling hard, if I recognize something's feeling off, like, especially my example is always business, right? Like, ooh, the way that I'm operating the business in this capacity, this feels off. This feels hard. I am not getting the results that I want. I'm pushing really hard. I am doing these things that I don't like the outcome. My natural inclination is to just like put my head down and try harder. So it took me a while to realize, like, oh, you pushing yourself to operate a highly complicated business with 18 different revenue streams in it and being a coach of low, high, and mid capacity to thousands of people at once
Mm-hmm.
is exhausting to you and you don't like it anymore. And it took me over a year to start listening to the fact that maybe it wasn't the way I was supposed to do it because it was hard and I didn't enjoy it anymore. Right. And so anyone can look at, a singular launch inside of that time period that didn't go the way I wanted and call it a failure, or me changing the model of my business as a failure, but I call it a win because of the margin that I have and because of the clarity that I have now on what I will take on and what I will not take on and what projects I'm willing to sort of like get off the ground and what ones I'm like, that's going to send me into a tailspin spiral. I mean, I literally was a a product of hustle culture and I had to unwork
Mm.
all of it. And it took me a long time to admit to myself that that's what needed to be done.
It's
That could
like
be a failure to anyone. Yeah.
it's like the most beautiful self-trust arc because it's like such a confidence arc because
Mhm.
it's like you build a business that is very successful and you're doing an incredible job and taking amazing care of your clients. And I'm sure there was a point where that felt really good.
Mhm.
And then things change. Sometimes the things that feel good for us at one time or are right for us in one time, we change. We're evolving. And it's like, okay, something about this doesn't feel right. And it's like resisting trusting that feeling for so long and then powering through and then just being like, no, I can trust myself. I can trust this feeling inside. And I built a business before. I can build a new iteration of this business. Like I can trust myself. And it's so shifting from like the external to the internal. And now, like, look at like this new season in your life and business professionally. Like, it's absolutely incredible to see. And so I love the through line of that story of that self-trust and that confidence that really goes from external, like my value is from hustling, my value is from like producing as much as possible. And not that good things didn't come from that or that you weren't doing good work during that time, because absolutely those things are true. To being like, I've got to be aligned internally and trust that good things are going to flow from that.
Mhm. And that's scary because not only are you doing it under a microscope with thousands of people watching, right? But all of this self-discovery is happening inside and you don't have a roadmap for where that's headed or what you want. And everyone's watching too, right?
Yes.
But the longer I pushed, the longer I delayed it, the louder it got, the harder it got to show up. And it was almost like every day that you take a step, another rock is added to the back of the pack. And you literally just get to a point where you can't carry the backpack anymore. Like if you don't fix this for yourself, the world is going to fix it for you.
Totally. You're learning one way or another. It's going to
Yeah.
happen one way or another. And
Yeah.
I think this is just an incredible example of navigating change without a perfect plan. So what did you navigate it with if you didn't have a perfect plan? Trusting yourself and figuring it
Yeah.
out one step at a time and just saying like, I know that I'm feeling drawn in this
Mhm.
from this direction to this direction, And I know that I can trust myself to figure stuff out along the way.
Mhm.
And you did, and you have. And then that I think is so cool because it's like that kind of little C confidence, like I can trust myself one step at a time, turns into like big C confidence where you're like, wow, I am confident to make big life changes when I know that it's right for me.
Mhm.
Yeah, absolutely. And for me, mine is running for public office and, failing. And it's funny because as I continue on that journey, as I was just having this thought right now, I'm like, I think I crave it in a way because I'm like, it's really the only thing that the only like real failure that like I get to experience most of the time, right? So it's like the only time I'm putting myself out there so much that I'm like, maybe that's why I do it. I don't know. Like, but I do think like it's such a good teacher. Because if you don't experience that like kind of gut punch every once in a while, like you don't get to work on yourself and you don't
Yeah.
get to be better. And so, that's what it has been for me. Like I would say over the last probably 8 or so years is just kind of this pursuit of public office. Um, and I don't know, I keep coming back because I'm like, well, let me refine and let me try this way and let me pivot and let me fix it. And,
Hearing
that kind
you
of thing.
gloss over what is the David and Goliath story of my lifetime is so disrespectful. I will be her friend and I will brag on her. The woman got in the arena, lost, got back in the arena, lost again, continues to get up, dust off her bloodied knees and her bruised ego, and get back in the same arena with the same people again and again and again. And also doing it while thousands of people are watching, and she does it with a smile. Unmatched.
Amazing.
Oh,
I
thanks,
mean, it's
guys.
so, I think what I was thinking about, I'm like, oh, I just want to tell both of you guys this, like with both of these examples, that I have loved you and respected you since the moment that we met. And we don't need to do things for external validation, but I just want to give you some, which is that I have always loved and respected you. But I think like in both of these examples, the inspiration and just the sheer like it's almost like you just layer like inspiration and encouragement in like gold glitter around everyone around you when you guys have been willing to do this, like both of you, like when you were willing to just really say like, I don't know exactly how this is going to go, but I am going to trust myself and I'm going to do this. And like, I'm moving forward, like with myself. I'm not going to leave myself behind and just keep forging forward in this way. Like we're getting together and we're moving forward like as a team. That was so beautiful and inspiring. And it's like encouragement for me. Like if and when I have moments in my future, and they will happen, where I'm like, wow, this thing that used to feel right doesn't feel right anymore. Like I will remember this and I will say like, that is encouragement to trust myself and to take it one step at a time. And Steph, to watch you like go through these, multiple elections and to see your resilience. I'm like getting
I
emotional.
know. I know. Me too. Me too. I can't live. And that's a good friend. It's the truth,
Wow,
though. I mean,
guys.
Oh my God, I don't wear the tissues.
I don't know. I think it's interesting because we minimize our lived experience to not
Yeah.
be so motivating to other people. But just remember that you're not only writing your chapter every single page, every day of your life that you show up, you're also writing a book that other people read and use as an
Oh,
encyclopedia for
yeah.
how they will move to. It is
Yes.
it is so powerful, and we're afraid to share it because we don't want to look dumb, or we're afraid to share it because we don't want people to not take us seriously. But the sharing it is how we learn how to make our own damn like collaborative book. This is the
Yes.
thing.
Yeah.
We have to share it.
And
Yeah.
let me just say, I would have, basically again, it's like, I'm not saying your journey is about me, but when I stuff like, think about if you had won the very first election, like I would have been freaking thrilled for you as your friend. I don't know what I mean, I wouldn't have been like, wow, this story that like your story has changed my life. I would just be like, this is amazing. Like you are incredible. You're
Mhm.
going to kick you're going to kick butt at this job.
Mhm.
We're all lucky that you're sitting in this position. And that would have been awesome. And here we are years later. And I'm just like, your journey has changed my life.
Oh
Literally.
my gosh.
Yeah. So
Well,
not that
thanks.
it's about me, but that's how it's impacted me. So I think that's like such a cool thing to realize. Like, we impact people so much more when we're our imperfect human selves, and when we're really willing to like live real life boldly and confidently and authentically. Like, that is more powerful than executing a plan perfectly and getting your desired outcome every single time. Like,
Mhm. Yeah. No, I mean, it's true. And I mean, I'll be honest, even hearing you say it that way, I'm like, yeah, that is true. We don't see it that way when we're in it every day, all the time, you know?
totally. Both of your examples, I think, have an added layer of, I'll just say, like, tension. I think like internal tension where there's a lot of eyes on you, right? It's one thing to be like, oh my
Yes.
God, I'm alone in my house navigating this thing that feels really hard, but like nobody knows unless I tell them, right?
Yeah.
And then it's
And
another thing to have a lot of eyes on you watching you go through this challenging experience. And I wonder, like, what was the internal dialogue or the pressure or the tension like for you both with that, and how did you work through that piece of it?
yeah, I will definitely say that, like, in the beginning, when I was first starting to build a business, the threshold for failure wasn't so high because it's like, okay, like if a handful of people see me look dumb, who cares, right? Like I could work myself mentally through that. But then as more and more people started to follow, it was almost like the cliff, you're like cliff diving and the cliff gets higher and higher. And so every single time you do something new or you show up or you make a big pivot, more and more people are watching. And so you can say that you don't care what people think until you're blue in the face, but the more and more people that watch, the more and more it exposes you to people who are not nice. And I mean, you haven't lived
Yes,
until you've gotten your first troll that says mean things to you on the internet that does not know you from Adam, that has no profile picture. That person will wreck your life for a minute. If
totally.
you, yeah,
Or in person at a polling location.
yeah, someone will
Or
say a
that
hateful thing to you to your eyeballs. How dare they?
truly
Yeah, I don't know. It's
amazing,
like
the things that
the
people will
cliff
say.
gets higher.
Yes. Yeah. And I mean, I think you have feelings and you're a person and you feel that. But I think being able to navigate through that, like when I come out on the other side of when I process like a mean comment and come out on the other side of it, that's just like one more notch kind of like in the tool belt of like, you're gonna be okay. Like that
Mhm.
builds the self-trust.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And the more you do that, the higher the self-trust gets and the stronger it is. And then if also like that can be an example for other people, then, that's amazing as well.
Unpopular in my circle opinion here. Um, when someone says something that is judgmental and hurts your feelings, it's okay to say that that hurt your feelings. Like I think a lot of people say,
Yeah.
"Oh, ignore them. Ignore the way they made you feel." I think I tried to do that for a long time and it made me feel even more shame and it made me more afraid
Yeah.
to show up. But if I would validate myself and say, they said that thing and it's still kind of bothering you and it really did like hit the ribs. That one got you and that's okay. And then you do whatever it is that you need to do, whether you talk through it with your therapist or you read all of the positive things that people have said to you, whatever your coping mechanism is to get through that. Without the validation, I actually think it makes the shadow of it happening again way bigger.
Yes. Guess I share that unpopular opinion with you, because I think that's the thing. It's like when it's in the shadow, that's when it feels really scary. It's like if you just shine some light on it, not that there isn't still like a tenderness there of like, this person said this thing and it really hurt me, or this
Mm.
person said this thing and it's literally my biggest fear. They just said it to me or
But
whatever.
it's like it's just three fingers. It's not an elephant. Okay. It's
Totally.
literally nothing.
Totally. And I think when you let it come out in safe spaces, like with close friends or in like a self practice with your therapist, with a coach, whatever it might be, it shines a light on it. It's like, okay, this doesn't have all of that power. Like there's still tenderness, but
Yes.
this person doesn't have like power over me.
Mhm.
And I think for me, a big thing in adulthood has been really learning to believe. And I would say this belief is like a practice. It's not just a belief where I'm like, yeah, it's just really easy for me to believe that I have those, but this is like a belief that I really have to practice. It's like, I am okay if everyone doesn't agree with me. I am okay if everyone doesn't like me. I am okay if everyone doesn't think that I'm nice. Like that, it isn't my purpose in this world to exist to be everyone's like best friend or like to say exactly what you want to hear or to be everyone's cup of tea or whatever it might be. And I think, for anyone who developed people pleasing as a coping mechanism, that can be really challenging, and it can be a scary thing about perceived failure when people are watching, because it's like, what will people think of me? That
Mhm.
feels like my armor of people pleasing or my armor of perfectionism like isn't going to be able to protect me in that. So I just really love what you both shared about that.
Yeah.
And I think it's important to call to light too, like there is a specific mold that women are expected to fill in terms of like the way that we behave and the way that we look and what we say. And that that mold makes it very scary when you're not that. Most of us are not that. And when you're told that being that mold is good, being that mold is right over and over again as a small person. And then you grow up and you are feeling this dissonance in yourself of like, that's not who I am, but that's who I have to be in order to be liked, safe, whatever. Like the breaking up with that is one of the hardest things that I see most women walk through. And all of us in our 30s and our 40s are radically like just starting to look in the mirror of this, like, oh, that was a filter that I didn't like. I did not like that. Those were
Yeah.
thick eyebrows they drew on me. Like, I don't
Yeah.
want it.
Or they were too thin.
Yeah.
Now we need to let them grow.
Uh-huh.
But I will say I agree with you guys in terms of, acknowledging when your feelings are hurt, because the more that you can kind of go through that work on yourself, for me, it makes it very easy to see that maybe other people aren't going through that work. And it makes it easier to have compassion, because you're like, oh, well, if you had been doing the work, you probably wouldn't be saying those things. And so, like how sad, how unfortunate. I don't know, that is your reality, but it also like it just puts it in perspective. Like
Mhm.
the more I do the work on myself,
Mm.
the easier it is to spot when the work isn't being done elsewhere,
Mhm.
and easier to kind of give that some grace and move on.
Mhm.
Yeah. It's amazing when you get to adulthood and you are intentional about trying to do inner work on yourself. And then you realize how many people, for various reasons, are not doing that. It's really uh, shocking, where you're like,
Yeah.
wow, I just, I think it's like you assume, because you're like, how could I even get through this
Yes.
without doing this work? Right. Like, I'm just
Yeah.
like, I don't even feel like it's a choice. I'm like,
But
how,
yeah, it's not a choice.
how are
But
we getting
also
through the
though,
day without this?
another point of celebration, like for those of you out there doing the hard work, like you are being so hard on yourself about how hard it is to do the work when
Yeah.
you're doing what most people will never
Yeah.
even consider doing. Like, oh my gosh, you not celebrating that, you not saying like, hey, you did a really hard thing. Every day you got up and you looked in the mirror and you tried to be a better you and you tried to be more patient and more kind and do things right.
Mhm.
God, like you deserve a medal. You're an Olympian.
Absolutely. How do you feel about the way that the people that you're closest with, the people that you spend most of your time with, or who you share with, how do you feel like they impact this for you, if at all?
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it feels tremendous.
Yes.
Yes,
Mhm.
it does. I feel yes, it does. Um, no, I mean, I think it's tremendous. Like that is so impactful on the outcome of the work and the outcome of you navigating through the work. I mean, if it's the wrong people, and they're not on board and you guys are not in alignment with, processing things and just how we feel about self-growth and compassion and confidence and all these things, it's tricky because you're going to be sharing and you're going to be met with something that's not in alignment with where you're trying to go. But the flip side is if you are met with people who are doing the same kind of work and trying to move in the same direction, it's like the gold glitter you were talking about, right? Like it's very magical and powerful.
Yeah, it either makes it 10 times harder to do the work or 10 times easier to do the work.
Yeah.
And I mean, there's going to be some people in your life that you either don't want to get rid of that make it harder, or you feel like you can't get rid of that make it harder. But then there are going to be surprise people in your life who you never thought were going to make it easier that make it so much easier.
Yeah.
And you have to be willing to show those parts of you, like we were talking about before, so that these people, like
Yeah.
the ones that we have in this room here, make it easier for you because you're out there trying to navigate these complex feelings inside of yourself while being met with resistance from other people in your life who aren't doing the work, right? And that makes it even harder for you to have to practice. So, yeah, I mean, people make everything messy and hard. I hate it. If I could like be alone forever, I would, but I can't because I guess we're like pack people or something. I
I
don't know.
know.
I guess we need each other.
It's so true. I can always tell when I'm just getting overwhelmed with the messiness of people because I'm like, I'm going into hermit mode.
You and me both, girl. I'm like, give me that shell, make it big. We're going in.
Like, I just can't deal with any more of these dynamics. I need to be by myself. Sometimes when I am by myself, I'm like, oh my gosh, wow, life is like so simple when you're by yourself.
I know. Have you
Not that
thought,
it's as
have you
rich
spent
or
some
meaningful, but
It's easier.
Have you thought about like this is weird in my daydreams? I'm like, oh, I live on a lake in a cabin by myself. The birds are my companions. They talk to me. The raccoons are kind. They eat my garbage. Like I have a garden. There's no one. It's me. That's like the place I go to in meditation. Do you go there?
I love that. I have a similar one, but it's just on the beach.
Yes.
But of course, in my mind, I'm at the ocean. It's very similar though. There are seagulls. There are also birds. Oh my gosh, I love it. I really love what you shared about how part of making the most of, the relationships and the connections and those being things that actually can facilitate this to feel a little bit easier is that there's a part in there that's like vulnerability, and that you have to be willing to show these imperfect parts of yourself to people in your life. And that doesn't mean that you have to share like your whole life with every single person, but like to be vulnerable with someone who you want to have that like closeness with, and who you want to be able to like mutually support in the imperfection that is like humanness. That there also is a part of that where it's like you do have to show those parts of yourself. And so I just love that you touched on that vulnerability, because I think that small steps to being vulnerable is such a powerful place to start. If someone's like, I just feel like I have to be so perfect in my relationships or in my work, and that I have to have this perfect facade up all the time where people, won't love me, or they won't want to work with me, or whatever the thing might be, or I have to be this perfect mom, or like, my kids won't love me, or whatever the story is that we are telling ourselves inside. That part of that work is brave and scary, of showing like your real imperfect self to these people.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, everyone has to make their own judgment call at what is safe and who is
Yep.
safe, right? To share that with. And I tell you to be tender with yourself and pick somebody that you really do feel like you can trust to test that vulnerability with. But if I had $1 for every time I said something to my partner, and he was like, I had no idea you felt that way. And then the immediate flood of like, oh, thank God I don't have to carry that anymore. When like even with your most trusted people, if you can't figure out a way to show your heart, like you're going to literally be carrying it alone.
Yeah.
It's almost like you drop the bag off every time you open up one little piece to someone that you trust. And so, yeah, test that in a safe way,
Yeah.
and then expand. You get really safe with one person, and then you grab another one and you bring them on in with your gooey gushy. I always feel like it's like a rib cage, and like it's like if I let you into my rib cage, like nothing's going to hold it all together. Like it's just guts in there. Like what's going to happen, you know?
Totally. I remember being so afraid that if someone saw the whole imperfect me, that it's like, oh my gosh, then if they like it's the rejection feels so scary because it's like if I get rejected being myself, like myself that I know deep down inside, then it feels like real rejection rather
Yeah.
than just like, a little bit of rejection, but like it's not the whole me. So you didn't reject the whole me.
Mhm.
But I think what I've learned is that the the flip side and what is true more of the time is that you actually get to feel like really loved where you're like, "Oh my gosh, this is like this is love of the whole me. Like
Mhm.
this is real love. It's not conditioned on me being perfect." And that's been like such a gift.
Because when they choose you and it's really you, nothing feels better.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you both. I love you dearly, and I'm just so glad we got to have this conversation today.
Yay.
Love your
Thank you.
guts.
Love you.